Ollie, you're a man who's directly involved with advising people about future decisions and
Yeah.
what they're going to do in the long run. After years of experience, and now you're solely responsible for your own business, what's one thing that you've learnt about humanity when forced to confront ideas of mortality and sudden change?
Yeah, look, really, really good question. I think, the industry I'm in, obviously, the nature of it is we're talking about what happens when you die, which it's not a very nice thing to talk about. People like to bury their head in the sand with it, whether that be avoiding calls with you, might just be pushing it back quite a bit. I feel like everybody kind of knows that they need life insurance, but it's on a to-do list, which is right at the bottom. So I think the main thing is when people have got themselves into that headspace, they're open to kind of figuring out what they need. But also that kind of burying their head in the sand, they don't actually know what's happening. They haven't considered it ever before in their lives. So to kind of run you through like a typical conversation I would have with someone, obviously there's a bit of explaining what everything is. What is life cover? What is critical illness cover? What is income protection? But then it's more of a case of asking them questions to find a need. Now, not everybody needs this. I'll be really transparent with you. There is some cases where I'll say to someone, do you know what? You shouldn't change anything about your current circumstances. You'd almost just be throwing money away each month. It's quite rare. Usually it's someone who's got a huge amount of assets anyway. But what you then need to kind of transfer that conversation to is, what happens if you are long-term sick? People often say to me, I've never even thought about that before. Which is, it's interesting. I don't know. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, do you know what? From a young age, it's always been a weird one for me. Especially recently, I've read the likes of like the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and stuff,
Great
which
book,
is,
yeah.
yeah, have you read it yourself?
I've tried to.
It's not easy.
I was listening to the audio book quite a bit, but
It is a great book.
I've heard snippets of it, people talking about it.
Yeah, it is a great book. And
yeah.
one of the key things he does there is, the contemplation that one day he will die.
Yes.
So it's definitely been something that I've definitely thought a little bit more about recently, despite only being like 20 years old. And
Yeah.
most people
Yeah.
probably don't consider these things until they're at least maybe 40s. I mean, you can probably answer that question for me, but I've always wondered, like, at what age do you write a will? Or, because things can just be taken away from you like that. And there have been
Yeah.
recent examples of, tragedies like the Anthony Joshua car crash not so long ago. And
Yeah.
that really made me think, these guys are fairly young, and things can be taken away from you just like that. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something that I thought that you always kind of have to have considered.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
At what age do you think, like, most people really do start to consider it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very individual, first
Yeah.
of all. I mean, you raised a couple of really, really good points there. So statistically, when a celebrity dies, especially a young celebrity, or a celebrity gets critically unwell, and I'm not talking about myself individually, but these are kind of published stats from insurers, the overall market for insurance or the sales in insurance will increase. And I think what that comes from is people realizing their own mortality. It's a bit like insurance.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. And they often say insurance is recession proof because with people worrying about other areas of their life, they go and buy protection, which, makes it a bit sad because it's like, people should have this anyway. They shouldn't just have it when they feel worried.
Yeah.
It's both good and bad, right? But I think, people actually realizing that they're real and things can happen. We spoke about Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life before this. And I believe one of the rules is take care of yourself as if you are someone you're taking care of.
Yes.
And he gives an analogy, which is you wouldn't miss your dog's treatment You know, you wouldn't, you know, if your dog needs to take a pill, you're going to do absolutely everything you possibly can to make sure your dog takes that medication, antibiotic, or your child. You know, they're going to have that medication every single day. Yet people miss their own medication. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because people think things are going to happen to other people. They don't think it's going to happen to themselves. And it does, you know, and it's sad.
They avoid the uncomfortable thought right up
Exactly.
until
Exactly.
maybe it's too late sometimes.
Yeah, and look, maybe it's positive thinking, right? Which, you know, I don't think you should live your life in fear, but I think you should make sure you're prepared for everything, because immediately something could come along and just wipe everything out, you know, and you are in a really, really tough spot. You also mentioned about wills. So when do you write a will? It's something crazy, and I mean, if you Google it, I think it says 50%. I've heard from people in the industry it's as high as 71%. 71% roughly of homeowners do not have a will. So this is people who have a significant, people who have a significantly large asset which needs to be passed on to someone, do not have a will. Now, of course, like, you know, if you're married, often it will just be passed to the other one. But let's say both people pass away, you know, maybe you've got young kids. Who looks after those kids? You know, have you written that down? Have you actually got something in writing to say my parents or my best friend or my brother are going to look after my kids? Because if they don't, the local authority will handle that. You know, and they're going to be the ones who are going to decide where these kids go. You know, it's like, have you seen a series of unfortunate events?
Yes.
You know,
that's what
just
happens.
goes to the closest blood relative. You know, what happens if they're a horrible person? You know, it's quite a dramatic example, but you know, you've really got to prepare for those sorts of things and just make sure that you've lined it all up. So I encourage anybody who's got children, got a home, probably at any stage, write a will.
Yeah. It doesn't cost anything really, just a bit of time and...
Yeah. I mean, we're in the process of setting up a wills and estate planning business as well. I think we're talking about death all the time. It's worth having something there. Just to give it an idea of cost. So for us, I think we're going to set the prices at like £150 to write a will, at £250 for a couple. So, you know, small discount. Which is nothing. You know, to write something that hopefully is going to last, you know, depending on how old you are, could last 20, 30 years. You know, you can always amend it at times. It's you know, and that shouldn't cost anything. But, you know, obviously if you've got a really complicated estate, maybe several ex-partners and, you know, business assets outside of the UK, it might be a bit tricky and going to cost a bit more. But for a simple will, just get it done.
Yeah.
You know, and I was talking about the long list of things that people need to do that stick their head in the sand. This is one of them. You know, writing a will, setting up their life cover, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
when most people actually come to a business like yours,
Yes.
seeking for advice, do you think they do it on their own initiative or their own, like by themselves, or they've been urged and forced to do it?
I don't think it's necessarily forced, but I think a lot of people are unaware of what protection is, what like even life insurance. It's a very common word. You know, everybody knows what life insurance is, but people don't really know when they should get it. Even my own brother, right? So my brother's just bought his first ever house. He knows I've worked in this industry for years, and I've sort of said to him, "You've just bought your house. We haven't done your insurances." And he said, "Well, I don't need any of that." I said, "Well, you do." So we're setting it up now, but it's just interesting because he's had a blood relative, very close blood relative, working in this industry and still didn't know he should have done it. And there was a bit of a debate at the family dinner table, and my parents just said, "No, Ben, you need to do this. You know, you've got a mortgage with your girlfriend. You know, like, nothing will go wrong, but if it does, you just need to make sure you've got protections in place." So yeah, it was an interesting one.
That Jordan Peterson rule is so interesting though, because I think you see it everywhere, right? It's like the likelihood that you mentioned the dog, the likelihood that your dog will follow and complete. I think I saw Chris Williamson talk about it on Modern Wisdom. But the likelihood that your dog will complete a series of antibiotics medication is like 98% or something.
Yeah.
But the likelihood that you will is like 30%. and but it's crazy and
Mental. Yeah.
it's life-changing advice though. Treat yourself like someone you're responsible for taking care of.
Yeah.
I think everyone should adopt a little bit of that kind of philosophy in their life. And would you say that that's definitely something that you have learnt yourself from being in this particular industry?
Yeah, I think something, I think I've learned that from Jordan Peterson, not necessarily from being in this particular industry with regards to taking care of yourself. I think you can take your own advice is probably a good one. I'm very aware of a lot of things I should do a lot of the times, and maybe don't do that because caught in the moment. You're sort of just push that back to later. It's a bit like list making, right? You should have a list ready at the beginning of each day to say what you're going to do that day, what you're going to achieve, and that's the guidance I would give anybody, right, who's in my industry or not. I don't do it every single day. I try to, but it's like, I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. So I think it's, I can definitely be better on that. But taking your own advice is probably a good thing, as well as others, of course. But
you've shifted now from, you've got years of experience
Yep.
in doing this, and being a business owner for it is more of a recent thing.
Very recent, yeah.
For a lot of people, I think that shift is terrifying. The security of employment and, working for someone, it's, what to do, you're told what to do, you don't have to think on your own accord, figuring out what to do.
Yeah.
But there's so much change in transferring from being an employee to being an employer, being a business owner, being solely responsible, and for you particularly, I think when you are responsible for life advice, advice on like finances, what happens when you die and all this kind of stuff is, I can imagine it's quite a big shift for you. What's one thing that you've learned in doing so?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I've got a lot to learn. I'm still in very, very early stages of this. I think I've been quite fortunate with this because it's been a fairly gradual move. So I don't know how much you know about this, but with FCA regulated firms, you have to get your firm approved by the FCA, which takes a long time. It's probably been a year in the making before I've been able to actually go, right, this is now started. So I've had a lot of time to kind of realize what I'm doing, really think about it. And I was terrified. I was like, what happens if it doesn't work? With all these things running through your head. But do you know what? I had the one thing which made me feel so confident is I had a client who I dealt with for years. So, we reviewed their cover every couple of years. They were a very, very successful client. And I was talking to them about their cover review, and they sort of said, it's so funny. I feel like I've known you for years, because I was 17 when I started. And he said, I can really see you've grown up quite a lot. And he'd just started his business from being employed. He was earning a lot of money being employed and then moved to self-employed or starting his own business. I said, well, do you know what? This is probably the last time we're going to do this because I'm moving on. I'm setting up my own company. And by the way, I wasn't saying that to take him with me. I can't do that. I'm not going to do that just because I still have a really good relationship with my previous employer. But it was just to kind of say goodbye. And he said, you won't fail. And he said that just with such conviction and sincerity. And it was just like, coming from someone who's done that, made me feel so much warmth and reassurance and confidence. And I think one of the biggest messages is, if you're taking that kind of risk, calculated risk, you won't fail. If you, and I don't think not everybody should be naive and just start a business in something they don't necessarily know about. But if you know about something, you have a good idea, it's something you want as well. Not people want, not everybody wants this, but a lot of people do. You won't fail. You can't. So
sheer determination will get you there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How do you deal with hiccups in the road?
Well, no, I mean, I think at this stage it's hard to say what kind of hiccups. There hasn't been any just yet, and I'm nervous for them because there's going to be tons, and I think I'm very, very fortunate that I've got two very, very well-respected mentors within my industry who are helping me with this project. And they're guiding me through a lot of stuff, which is, I couldn't be luckier, if I'm honest, and but I think, it's a case of, I don't know what we're going to do when we face them, but I think relying on them, just to kind of give me guidance.
Seeking advice from the people.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even imagine what that could be like, at this stage, because it's, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, we were talking about this beforehand.
Yeah.
That, you can't let yourself know too much. You can't think that you know too much. And the amount that you know is infinitely disproportionate to the amount that you don't know. The amount that you don't know is just infinite. You don't even know how much you don't know.
Yeah.
There's always room and things that you can be doing to learn more and stuff.
Yep.
And you seem like a person who likes to seek advice from two important mentors. Your dad seems to have played a big role in your life too, maybe family all around you and this sort of thing. How important would you say it is to seek that out for guidance and figuring out what to do?
One of the most important things, I think appreciating that we talked about this and obviously just briefly touched on it, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I've been aware of this for quite a while, and it's one of our human unconscious biases.
What is the Dunning-Kruger effect?
So it's essentially where you believe you know a lot about a topic based on the scope of information that you have. So they did so Dunning-Kruger did a psychology experiment where they essentially asked people to rate their ability in certain topics. So, for example, maths, science, English, whatever. And invariably, the people who rated themselves highly, so 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, would perform worse on the exams that they then did after. So they had a questionnaire, how good are you at this? And then they did a test. Whereas the people who maybe said, look, I'm a 5 or 6, generally speaking, performed significantly better. And the idea of this is, if you've studied something for a long time, so for me, it's insurance. I've studied insurance for 9 years. You start to appreciate how much information is out there. Whereas if you've only learned this much, you don't know all of this. You don't even know what you don't know. So I like to apply this with everything I do. And it's really hard to avoid unconscious biases because, I've mentioned I started playing golf and it's like, oh yeah, I kind of start to know a lot about golf now. And it's like, don't fall into that trap, Ollie. You probably don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of appreciating, right? If I'm going into business, I need to be aware that I don't know what I don't know. It's hard to do that. So I seek guidance from anybody who can help, and not everybody's guidance is going to be perfect, but I think I like to take advice and just kind of take it in, appreciate that person knows a lot more than me, and just try and learn from it. And learn from other people's mistakes. It's for free. You don't even need to make the mistake yourself.
Yeah. Another thing that I take actually from, you can probably tell I listen to a lot of Chris Williamson on Modern Wisdom, but he speaks about this thing called unteachable lessons. And it's like, we always receive advice about doing things and not doing things. Don't do this, I did this, but it's not something that you can learn by someone telling you. You kind of only learn from experience and realizing, that wasn't the right thing to do. Yeah. But a previous guest I had on to touch on that Dunning-Kruger effect, he said the day you think you know everything is the day you stop learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's just spot on. When you think you know everything, and for someone who maybe people look at them and think they know everything, or they are particularly good at a certain subject, people hold them on a pedestal, and it's very easy to get ahead of yourself a little bit, and you think you know everything, so you stop learning.
Yeah.
And learning's an uncomfortable process. It's an admission of ignorance, which can be very humiliating. but I think that's the foundation of growth too. You don't grow if you're unaware of your ignorance, and you got to be very humble to be able to accept that and move forward with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you find a big bit of that when you were coming towards the end of, being an employee, having done it for many years? Was reaching out, stepping out of being an employee to business life, was that, was that a way to deal with not getting ahead of yourself and starting something new and something in an industry where you don't know everything?
Yeah. So I guess for me, I was definitely subject to what you mentioned about, when you start thinking you know everything. So in my previous role, as I said, I was there for a long time. I was the top performing sort of advisor in terms of generated business for the entire time I was there. From the first month, I had generated more in that month than most people did in a year. So I got very arrogant, especially because I was quite young, and as you mentioned, I thought I knew everything, and I almost stopped learning, which was bad. And I learned from that, because, you kind of reach a point where you're plateauing. And although everybody's kind of admiring you and, you're winning awards, industry awards, you start to feel, well, where am I going next? What am I doing now? And it was a case that then we start looking at ways to improve and realize that you're not perfect. You're not this amazing human that can do everything. You might be good at it, but you're not there. And I think that realization probably happened 2-3 years ago, and you start, right, what more can I do? And then it came on to starting a business. Starting a business has always been an ambition of mine. I've always known I've wanted to do it. It was just a case of when. Do you know what? I think I like to appreciate the relationship I'm currently in with my girlfriend for this as well. She's helped me a lot with the kind of self-confidence of appreciating my own ability and that kind of next step of, you can do this. So I get a lot of support from her, which I think is invaluable to everybody. Get yourself in a good relationship that works. So,
well, they say the difference between a billionaire and a millionaire is his partner or her partner. Your partner is key in making you go that extra step further.
Absolutely. And it I think that's been the kind of transition point, and that point where I've gone, right, I'm doing this now. There's no more waiting. As I said, I've always had that plan. I've always known that that's going to be the next step. I think it just kind of helped me put all the end pieces of the puzzle together.
Did you procrastinate the decision to make the change?
It wasn't a procrastination. It was more of a fear. I was very comfortable. I was earning a very good living, to be honest. And I was being admired by everybody. It's a really lovely way to exist. And, everybody I worked with was incredible. I really, really liked the company I worked at. My colleagues, my bosses, the industry as a whole. So it's hard to step away from comfort and go, this isn't enough for me. Who on earth would do that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy, but I think it's about finding your purpose and that meaning, and that why am I here? Why am I existing? It's not for comfort necessarily. It's for the journey, and it's a new start to a new journey now. And that's exciting. It's risks. There's going to be hiccups, as you mentioned. I won't necessarily know immediately how to deal with those, but that's exciting, and at the end of it, you've then got to figure out what you want to do next. So
TELOS, the name of my podcast.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but it actually means ultimate purpose, ultimate aim.
Yeah.
I think it's actually said telos in ancient Greek, but we're English and we like to say things in our own way. So telos, and when I was coming to think about the name of this podcast and stuff, and I wanted to make it personal to me, but I didn't want to put my name in it, that sort of thing. It's not necessarily about me, it's about you and the other guests that I've had on. I was thinking about what's one thing that's particularly on my mind. And I'm 20 years old myself, and been on a constant search for purpose and finding meaning in things. And I think it's a stabilizer for not just like mental health, but just feeling good about life. If you feel like you've got purpose, feel like you've got meaning. Responsibility is a big part of that. I think that's why so many people are naturally driven to being business owners. The higher the responsibility, the higher the risk. It takes away elements of freedom, I suppose, and security, but it gives you more meaning, a bit more zest to life.
Yes.
Would you say that you found that so far in being a business owner?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and again, maybe this is naive. I hear a lot of business owners and they say, I've got no time to do anything else. I've got to do that. And again, maybe once I've had children, it will be a bigger problem time. But at the moment, this is my life. I'm completely dedicated. It's like it's not a 9 to 5. It's literally my existence. Every single minute of every single day, I'm thinking about it. The shower, I'm thinking about it, which is cool. It's like there's something to wake me up in the morning and maybe keep me awake at night. It's not perfect, but it's good. I think the biggest thing for me was, so one of my mentors, as I mentioned, so he used to run a huge network in our industry. If you meet him for 5 minutes, you will feel motivated. He is honestly one of the most incredible people to be around. We used to do a lot of sessions with him where we would do like goal setting. And goal setting is one of the most important things I think any young person should do. And you've got to start almost at the end. Where do you see yourself finishing? Where do you see yourself financially, emotionally, your family? Do you have a dog? What does that even mean? What does that look like?
Creating a clear picture.
Exactly. And I think I don't know. I've always had that in my mind. I don't know about you, but you probably know where you want to be eventually. But a lot of people are kind of lost along the way. But I think if you start yourself there, then you can almost work yourself back in kind of figuring out, right, well, I've got this amount of time, 20, 30 years before I want to get to that. Let's break it down. How do we get there? What do I have to do by year 10, then year 5, then year 1? So I think it's just kind of having the tram lines to keep you on track and know where you're headed. But yeah, I think goal setting is one of the most important things for me in just keeping myself driven and a purpose. It's also exciting, you get to say, I've done that now, and then you set yourself some more goals and achieve more. And, it doesn't need to be a massive astronomical goal, but making something that is achievable, but also a little bit hard, and you've then done it, that makes you feel amazing.
It's definitely an occurring theme, that what you've just said. It's definitely an occurring theme in quite a few of the guests I've interviewed is celebrating things.
Yeah.
It'll be 2 or 3 episodes ago now. I had, it might have been 2. I had a man on, his name's Paul Highfield, and his story is incredible. Lost everything, built it all. And one of the key things for him, which he'd love to advise people on, is just celebrate the small things.
Yeah.
Like he was saying that he was celebrating being on my podcast today. And it's only a small podcast, but he loves the opportunity to talk about this sort of thing. And that keeps him going. People think of goal setting as having these like large, elaborate, fantastical goals that
absolutely.
you go and do amazing things and go down in history for. And while that's a nice thing to think about, obviously that's the biggest picture you could imagine. It's about celebrating the small things along the way, because that's what actually keeps you going. That's what keeps you fueled as you are on this long journey ahead to the big goals. And
absolutely,
is this something that you'd say you do continually? Like when you achieve a goal, a micro goal, macro goal, do you then search for another goal to go and achieve after that?
So beginning of this year, we have our target for the end of the year, which that's the annual goal for the business, and kind of that's what we want to achieve. What we'll then do is work out what does that translate to monthly? Now, obviously, as a new business, it's not going to be spread evenly across each month. However, we have now got a target for the end of each month, which we need to hit. We then broke it down per week. We've then broken it down per day. And how do you eat an elephant? You can't just eat it in one go. You eat it piece by piece. So once you've broken down, no matter how big something is, that goal, obviously it has to be within reason still. It can't just be insane. You can then break it down into daily goals, daily focuses. And you can even translate that into, what do you need to do? In my role, let's say I need to hit a certain target each day. Does that mean I need to make a certain amount of phone calls? Does that mean I need to send a certain amount of emails? And you can kind of translate that quite easily. And let's say you miss it one day, you miss your target for one single day. It's not the end of the world. You can make it up. You can't make up a month.
There's a great, again, kind of quoting Chris Williamson, but there's a great part in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah.
A habit missed once is a mistake. A habit missed twice is the beginning of a new habit. Which I think is so true, because then once you miss it again, you then start to head the other direction. And so to apply it with what you're saying, if you miss it one day, that's fine. If you don't meet the goal, the objective, the aim one day, that's fine. But go straight after it the next day. And as long as you genuinely try to get it the next day, I think that prevents you from building a habit of going back the other way. It's like with the gym, right?
Yeah.
If you say to yourself, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days this week, and for whatever reason you couldn't make it to the gym one day, that's fine. But then if you do the same again the next day, you're then going to start building the habit of not going to the gym. I really like that. I think about that quite a lot if I hit the snooze button once and I've slept in, I'm like, I feel terrible about it. But then the next day I'm like, right, I can't do that again, because then I'm going to start building a habit of hitting the snooze button.
Yeah. I think on that as well, you're almost psychologically setting yourself up for failure if you miss it more than once. Missing it once, I agree, it's fine. However, if you constantly miss what you've been aiming for, you're psychologically going to perceive yourself as a failure because you're not doing what you've set out to do. And that can apply for literally any element of your life. Like, I'm not going to get a takeaway tonight, and you end up getting a takeaway, or I'm going to make sure I go for a run or go to the gym or whatever. If you don't do what you said you're going to do, you will probably subconsciously think negatively about yourself. So I think, I guess, stick to what you're going to say, probably. And I think missing, once, it's not the end of the world. Make it up and make sure you do. Almost give yourself no excuses. It's hard to, but
it's important, I think, to develop the habit of being a man of your word as well, not just with other people, but with yourself.
Yeah,
there's this great kind of explanation of what happens when you keep lying to yourself, and it's like if you had a friend, right, and you always ask this friend to meet you at wherever, go watch the football at the pub, or you keep inviting this friend to go watch football at the pub with you, and they consistently just don't turn up. You're going to stop inviting this friend to the pub because you just think, the last 5 times I've invited you, you've just not turned up, and I've watched the game by myself. That's not ideal. So you're going to stop inviting that person. You're that person to yourself. If you say you're going to do something and you consistently let yourself down, you're going to end up losing trust in yourself. And I suppose you are the one person in your life that you spend the most time with. And I think it's very important that you stick to the things that you say you're going to do. And I suppose for you right now, being a business owner, having way more responsibility than, I don't know if you imagine the responsibility that you've got right now, or, it's kind of hit you suddenly, but I suppose you're in a position where you're really starting to realize this.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of responsibility, it's, especially when we're giving advice and you're responsible for that advice, and anything goes wrong, it's on you. it's hard, but I think I know I'm doing the right job, and I think that's why I can be very calm, when it comes to stuff like that. Obviously, you're constantly worried, have I done a tax form correctly? And,
Yeah.
Seeking guidance on that is probably the best thing you can do. But I think if you always act with integrity and kind of treat people fairly, hopefully it should be okay. I don't get nervous that I've ever done anything wrong, because I've always acted with the best intention I can. It's almost do it nice or do it twice.
Mm-hmm.
If you rush things, you don't treat that customer fairly, you don't follow up with them, you're going to have to do it all over again. You've got to really be careful and precise with what you're doing, which is one of my biggest, most important things. Fortunate enough, I'm not employing anybody yet. I know that's going to come with its own challenges. I've got my first starter next week, which is, again, a massive responsibility, thinking about everything that goes on with that. So I think that's when it's going to start to come more stressful, and this is when I'm going to start relying on everybody for guidance as much as I possibly can. But as I said, it's going to be treating them with the integrity I've received from previous employers, because I've always loved them and always loved being there. And I think you can't go wrong with that, can you?
No.
Just being honest.
Yeah. I think honesty and telling the truth will get you exactly what you want to get, but it's the most painful path to take.
Yeah.
Confronting things and taking it head on and not avoiding. And the truth and honesty will set you free in the long run. You'll be free from lies and false images and living up to a projection. This is another thing that people suffer with, is imposter syndrome.
Yes.
You feel like you're not the person that people think you are. That's a mad place to be, really.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying. Always trying to live up to a lie.
Yes.
It's not a nice place to be. People speak a lot about niches, and for yourself, you're in a particularly dense market. It's quite competitive. There's a lot going on. How do you find your niche?
So I guess for me, my whole career, I've always focused on the client experience, and just making sure, first and foremost, everybody understands what it is and they're getting the best advice. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes someone's got a really, really good insurance that I shouldn't replace. I shouldn't even bother touching it. And I will give them the right advice, and I will say, do you know what, I'm going to rubber stamp this. This is what you should have. And again, I'm giving them advice still. I'm helping them set up a policy. So for me, that's the most important thing, is the customer journey, not just at point of sale, but also claim stage. If someone needs to actually use the insurance, I want to be that intermediary that they can rely on. Even if I need to sit on hold with them, help them fill out claims forms, I want to be there because I've dealt with it before. I'm the expert in this area. So that's where it starts, is the customer experience. A really big part of this for me as well, so we're a whole of market broker, which means we essentially can work with pretty much any intermediary provider. Whereas some providers or some brokers, they might have a restricted panel, which is fair enough, because maybe they got too much on elsewhere, so they don't want to work with as many insurers. But this is my life. I want to be the best I can be at insurance, and I want to understand everything there is to know about all of them. Now, with that means I can help people who have struggled to get cover before. People actually get told, sorry, you can't get insurance. This might be because of their health, it might be because of their lifestyle, sometimes even because of their family history. It's not even something that's directly affected them. And insurers are really strict. They will literally say to you, we don't want to insure you. And imagine being told that. It's not nice. So with the list of providers, my kind of area of expertise is helping people where they haven't been able to get help before. And making sure that everybody is included and everybody can get cover, whether that's a hazardous job, whether that's a really adverse health problem that they maybe have struggled with, or family history. It's anything that I can help with. The other thing is tech. Tech is such a big thing, and your big buzzword at the moment is obviously AI. I'm looking to integrate as many of the processes that I possibly can using AI. So a lot of our compliance procedures and things like that, we've kind of integrated to make it easy. Essentially so I can stay on the phone as much as possible. Now, in the long term, in building AI, and previous directors of mine and things like that, they're massively involved in it. And hopefully when I've been able to grow this company, it could be a case that we have advisors who don't necessarily know the job too well, but obviously we want to keep them on track. They could have prompts coming up to help them with the conversation, and just making sure that client is getting the same seamless experience throughout. Because not everybody can do this job. Not everybody can look at someone in the eyes and goes, "What happens when you die?" It's hard. And I'm playing my little violin here. But I have to talk about death all day, every day.
Yeah.
You've got to be a certain type of person to do that. It's interesting. So I think having as much help as possible turns someone who's potentially average into the best version that they can be. This is me stealing ideas, by the way, because this isn't my kind of initial thoughts, but this is the advice I'm getting from other people, which again is invaluable because they've got more life experience than me.
Are you finding it's working for you so far?
In terms of the AI integrations that we've got?
The advice that you're getting, the way you're going about doing your business so far, are you finding that the things that you're implementing and stuff is working for you currently?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the system that we've built already is incredible. We're looking at building like a client-facing app as well, which I don't really think anybody who's a broker who does. A lot of people don't really know what insurance they've got. So let's say you've bought an insurance, let's say you're a bit older than you are, let's say you bought it 10 years ago, or, your parents, or you maybe got an older sibling, whatever, 90% of people, if I ask them, what are you paying for each month? They go, I don't know. I say another 50% of them don't even know who they're paying or how much. Let me just check. And they literally have to read their bank statement to figure out who they are paying each month, which is interesting to me. But what I want to do differently is just make sure people are always aware of what again, they don't want to think about it all the time, right? And this is kind of linking back to what we spoke about right at the beginning. But I think just having that awareness or an app that a client could go onto and just go, right, this is who I'm paying each month. Just a reminder, right? This is what happens if I die. This is what happens if I get sick. Sometimes they might think, oh, maybe that's not enough because they've had a change. They've increased their mortgage. They've had another kid. They want to increase it. So it's a good reminder because these things need reviewing. Some people might say, I've cleared my mortgage now. I can cancel that. And that's a good reminder because that's going to save them 20, 30 quid a month.
Yeah.
So
to draw upon the rule of Jordan Peterson to treat yourself like someone you should be responsible for taking care of.
Yeah.
What advice would you like to give yourself more of and take it as if you were someone you were responsible for taking care of? What would that advice be?
Really, really good question. I think the biggest thing for me is I'd always like to be more healthy in fitness. I go to the gym not as regularly as I would like, but weightlifting's one thing. I want to do more cardiovascular fitness because whenever I have done that, I've felt the best I possibly could. Give up nicotine mints, little things like that. But I think in terms of day to day, list making and being more organized. I think with the business so far, I'm kind of where I want to be at the moment. I'm sure that will change, having only just started. But in terms of how I'm conducting myself, I'd like to think that I am the best version I could be so far. But as I said, as soon as it gets busier and busier, there will definitely be some adjustments that need to be made.
You're using one of the unthinkable notepads, I've noticed.
Remarkable. Yeah.
Not unthinkable, remarkable.
You should come up with a competition. Unthinkable.
Remarkable notepads. They look great. But yeah, that's, again, like you said, list making, staying on top of your.
I'm chaotic, you know, and it took me a while to realize how chaotic I was. I still am, you know. It's if you have a look at this, you wouldn't be able to understand it. But it's like the lists that I've made make sense to me. But this has helped me so much. You know, as I said, I used to have like 8 client calls a day where I've got a big notepad writing down what I need to do about the conversation, you know, because you do forget, we're only human.
Yeah.
And that's in a big notepad, 100 pages in it. No idea where it is. You're spending more time looking for it, and turns out it's in a different notepad. You know, so this just keeps everything really nice and neat and tidy. Where you know, I create a client folder, can just search their name. You know, I had some notes for this podcast, for example.
Yeah.
You know, just being able to go through everything.
Stay on the front foot as well.
Exactly.
It's when you start to fall on the back foot and you think, I need to do this.
Yeah.
God, now I got to do this. Oh goodness. Oh no, I've got all about all of that.
Yeah.
And like that's me personally. I am terrible. It's something that I know I need to work on this year, is being more organised. But I'm terrible at, like, I need to note make and set reminders and to do lists, and I say I do something and then I just forget. It's not that I've even chosen not to do it. I've just forgotten to do it, and it's definitely something that I think is vital when you're in a position like yourself.
Yeah.
Like the podcast for me, it's kind of like a business. You know, I'm doing it all on my own. So
Yeah.
remembering to pack all of the stuff, the equipment, and
Allen key,
and making notes, thinking about I know. If I forgot a microphone or something, oh, goodness. So, but yeah, it's very important that you don't fall on that back foot, because that's what makes your body go into like fight or flight mode and start panicking at the chaos, and you think, goodness, I've got to do this, and you can't handle it. Whereas for the same effort, you can be on the front foot.
Yeah.
And instead of just doing things when they fall behind, just do things to stay in front. And it's a skill that I think is transferable, and you can apply it to every aspect of life. Like even with just like cooking dinner at home, like you can think a little bit ahead. You can think, right, so that I'm not waiting, you know, for the chicken to marinate or for the oven to be preheated. I'll do this and this now and just stay ahead on the front foot in that way. And having the skill of being able to process and do that, I think would be transferable to business life too, and these sorts of things. And you know, it's again ties into that key theme of responsibility. What do they say? The best day of a man's life is realizing no one's coming to save him. Realizing that no one can do your shit for you. And would you say that that's definitely something that you've really had to come to grips with in the transition?
Yeah, because I think you know, when you're growing up, you think, everything's going to be looked after for me, it's not, is it? You know, I think the biggest realization I had was when I moved out, and I was the first feeling I felt was loneliness. It was like, this is strange, and then it's like, right, no one's here to cook you dinner. You know, I was 21 when I moved out, by the way, so still a child in a way, but you know, I definitely was. And it's like, well, you know, what do I do now? You know, and it's like, right, well, you're going to have to go to the shops, and it took me a while before I even started doing weekly shops. You know, I'm talking a long time, but you know, it was just like ad hoc. You know, I'll go to the shops or I'll get a takeaway, or you know, which is bad. It's really bad to do that, and I think you just immediately feel lost. You know, it's like I have no structure. So you force yourself out of that. You know, you kind of work out, right, this is what I do. No matter what, I have to stick to this. You know, I'm going to do my weekly shop to make sure I've got food, and I'm not going to stray from this and get a takeaway on a random Tuesday. You know, I'm going to make sure I'm looking after myself and going to the gym every day and doing that sort of thing. So moving out, that was the biggest thing. I think if I hadn't moved out, I probably wouldn't have had that much of a realization. I was very dependent, I think.
You got to expose yourself, haven't you? I guess. To expose yourself to things that you've never really known, and like we assume growing up as a kid, we assume that our parents are average parents. We think that most people's parents are like our parents, and we're used to the way things are, and we think that life's just like how it is as a kid. That's just how life is. And then there comes a stage, 21 years old for you, where you're in that big transition from having things done for you to having to do absolutely everything yourself. Do you think you learned some good lessons in that period that have helped you in what you're going through now?
Yeah, I think that one of the things for me is, because when I was growing up, you look at adults and you look at a lot of people and you think, one day I'll be like you and I'll know everything and I'll know what's going on and I'll be completely content with everything. Because when you're growing up, you're just kind of like, you're questioning reality, you're questioning all these different things. You're like, what am I doing? What is life? You know, and you think that adults know everything, and then you meet someone who's, you know, maybe in their 30s, 40s, who is just as immature as you, and you think, hang on a sec, you haven't changed. Why haven't you changed? Why aren't you like the other adults? And you realize that the adults are just pretending. You know, everybody's just pretending that they've got things figured out. You know, and that's the key. You know, if you don't pretend you know what you're doing to start with, you'll never get there. You have to. It's like I've read this really strange quote. It's like, in order to get to sleep, you first have to pretend you're asleep.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, you're literally sitting there like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to sleep now.
That's blatantly obvious, but something we've all never, none of us have actually thought about. Yeah,
it's really strange. Yeah. So it's like, and that you can apply that to everything. You know, before you are a business owner, before you are the financial advisor, before you run a podcast, you have to pretend that you do that. You know, and then it comes into reality, and you're like, wow, this is strange. But because you've already pretended, you planned it all out. It's now real. You feel more comfortable with it. You know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's the kind of
fake it till you make it.
I live by that. Yeah. Absolutely.
You've got to. The previous podcast I did, we dived quite deep into the idea of like the law of attraction and you know, how manifestation isn't just like thinking about wanting something. It's manifestation's almost this psychological conditioning that allows you to embody certain behaviors and traits that align with the things that you want.
Yep.
So for example, like manifesting having a certain job, you start to psychologically condition yourself, kind of like fake being the person you'd have to be that'd get into that job. And then eventually you kind of shift yourself and become that. And that's kind of how I believe anyway, these things like manifestation and the law of attraction actually works. You have to fake it in order to make it. You have to...
It completely works like that.
Pretend being it. Yeah, but it does. And you have to pretend being the person that can do it before you actually can be the person.
I mean, I can give you a decent story on that.
Please.
So when I started at my role, so I was at the same company for 9 years. I was an apprentice, 17 years old. I literally left school early because I thought I don't want to do A-levels anymore. Just went for a job interview, local. It's a small firm, 30 people. And they offered me the job there and then, because they were pretty chilled out owners and there was some connections there. I was earning £600 a month. I thought I was James Bond earning £600 a month, by the way. That was so much money for me as a 17-year-old. Spent the entire paycheck on the first day I got it, and it was just like incredible. Obviously now, you can't even exist on £600 a month, well, depending on your living situation, but, living at home, it was okay. Anyway, it got to the point where I started to realize this job I just signed up for, I just thought, right, I just want to get any job anywhere. It was quite exciting for me. I got to speak to people on the phone all the time, and my job was chasing solicitors, right? That was my job. It was a mortgage company, and I had to call solicitors for the hundreds of clients we had and ask them and push them for updates on the progression of mortgages. Conveyancing solicitors, especially when you're speaking to admin team. Some of them are lovely, by the way, but a lot of them do not want to speak to you. So I had to sit there and call people who did not want to speak to me, often sit on hold for 30 minutes, an hour at a time. And I loved it. I don't know why, but I just liked being on the phone and speaking to people, and it was interactive. And they kind of noticed I was good on the phones. They were like, right, you're pretty articulate. You don't shy away from it. And whenever someone would come into the high street office, I'd always be the first one up, to greet them. So like, do you want to start, just booking in appointments to see how you're getting on, and this was for insurance, and people who are going through their mortgage, they'll book in an insurance appointment, but sometimes it can be a bit trickier, especially when you're dealing with clients who you haven't spoken to. It's almost cold calling in a way. And I was really, really good at that. So they were like, right, we want to get you on track to start actually becoming an advisor, and selling essentially. And I was still on £600 a month, and I was going through all these courses and stuff like that. And it was probably, a year away, 6 months away before I could start doing anything. And I would say I earned a certain amount of money every single day to myself. I even said it to friends, but I essentially lied to them. I would literally say to them, I earn this much money. I do. I do. This is how much I earn. And that, later that year or the next year, I had earned that money. And it might sound silly but I genuinely believed that. And when I was saying this to people, and it's weird because I was lying, but I had that belief, and it happened. It was said with so much intention, and I knew I could do it, and it was there that it happened. So I'm a huge believer in that kind of,
fake it
if
till
you
make
believe
it.
it, fake it till you make it. But you've got to put in the work, and you have to actually believe it.
Napoleon Hill says, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. And if it's something that you can think about and genuinely believe is possible, you can do it.
Yeah.
And I suppose what you're saying there is kind of the silver lining to imposter syndrome. It's like you have to live up to the character that you have to. You have no choice. Because it's very the gap between the person that people think you are and the person that you are is very uncomfortable. And so the only solution that you have to that is reducing that gap. Now, either you can bring the image of what people think you are back to who you actually are, which no one wants. So I think the best way of going about it in the story that you've just described is by actually getting to that point, manifesting that in your own life, embodying the person that has that, and actually getting to that point. I think that's a good way of thinking about imposter syndrome. For someone who actually struggles with that, just close that gap. Don't stop letting this false persona escape you, and just become it. Close the gap, get closer to it. I do genuinely believe in. It's not magic. I really don't think it's magic. I think it's just like a fundamental pattern woven into reality.
Yeah. I think it's just a misunderstanding of how society and how our brains work. I think we almost think our brains are just here to, help us think, and, what else are they there for? But I think actually reality, and I don't even understand this, but it's a bit more confusing than it might seem.
Yeah.
And I think, it's like, someone who's got imposter syndrome, bringing themselves down to who they are. Who is anybody? What are you? It's like you can really just kind of bring it back to thinking, what the hell are you doing? You're a symptom of everything that's happened to you and everything around you. But also you are how you've taken that, because everybody takes things slightly differently, and you can decide. You can decide how you take things, and how you can decide how people perceive you. Which is fascinating, because you can think negatively that, oh, this person thinks I'm so and so, or you just change it. Because they probably don't think that anyway. They probably don't think about you at all. You can just change. that person thinks I'm amazing. You don't want to become obnoxious about it. But just rewiring your own brain to think how you want it to think, create your own reality. Why not? You can be as happy as you want.
Yeah.
You can ignore everything else and just be as happy as you want.
Do you know Naval Ravikant?
No.
He's brilliant. You'd love the stuff he talks about. He's radically honest, but he lives such a great life by the stuff he talks about, and he's honest about everything. And I guess you could consider him a philosopher, but he's a businessman. He's brilliant. Defo check him out after this.
Definitely will,
but he says, if you're so intelligent, why aren't you happy? And I think that's so true. I think true intelligence is understanding the one thing which we have control over in our life, which is our brain.
Yes.
I went to Mexico in October, November, early November, start November, and we went to this place called Isla Holbox, and we got this bus from Cancun up to Holbox, 2-hour journey, and we went through the jungle.
Amazing.
And as you're looking around, you see these little villages and like Mexican people, Mayan race, just living life with nothing, and they're happy.
Yeah.
And that gave me and my girlfriend, who I was with, still with, but I was with her at the moment, gave us a lot of perspective. We want a lot of things from life, but these guys are content with so little.
Yeah.
And it's good to want things out of life and to create things. But I think the truest skill and the truest form of intelligence there is being all right with what is, and being able to say, I am all right with this.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's how you think about things. It's how you control your thoughts and how you frame certain situations, like bad situations. Like a bad thing happens, you frame that as a lesson, or,
I completely agree. I think the difference, the things for me are happiness and meaning. They're almost different emotions. I think with a lot of the people who live life, as you mentioned, in the Mexican jungles or whatever, and they're just living life. Their meaning and happiness, they're kind of interlinked. Their meaning is existing in that capacity. Mm-hmm. Whereas I suppose for us in a potentially more complicated society, we're almost given so much short-term dopamine that we confuse that with happiness. And I think your kind of destiny and where you want to go with life, that's not going to bring you happiness. That's just going to bring you purpose and drive and make you. It's a different emotion from happiness, because I would associate happiness as like being with my family. Spending time on the golf course. That's going to make me happy and make me content. But it's not going to give me purpose. I wouldn't want to play golf all the time. I might at the moment, but I personally would get bored of that. And that wouldn't. Otherwise, I'd try and become a PGA professional. Which never would happen. But you get the picture. So I could be happy doing those things, but it's like that's not my purpose. My purpose is slightly different. I guess that they have their own. Like, what do they do for work? They maybe have a farm. And that's their purpose. They're kind of growing they're doing it all organically. I think a lot of the time children will become a lot of people's purpose. And just I think from what I've heard at least, they kind of have this switch where nothing else matters apart from their kids' well-being. And maybe that means that they're going to go out and work really hard because they need to support their child. But I think that's always an interesting thing, isn't it?
A lot of people say when they become parents that it's the most life-changing thing that's happened to them, because
sure it would be.
Something's
now more important than you.
Yeah. We all suffer with, not suffer, but we're under the illusion sometimes that like we're main characters, because in all honesty, we don't know everyone else's experience. It comes back to that thing of like which I think weirds everyone out. But I don't know that you exist, and you don't know that I exist because you can't live from my perspective.
Yeah, nothing behind me is there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's that old philosophical question that's like, if a tree falls in the woods, does it even make a sound if no one was there to hear it? You know. But yeah, we're all under that illusion, I think, of, you know, that we are the main characters, and it's quite having kids and stuff. I think about it quite a lot. One of the biggest things in my life is I'm super looking forward to. I don't want to say I can't wait because I can wait, but I'm super looking forward to the stage of my life where I'm a dad, and I'm looking forward to the things that I'll learn, not just the things that I'll teach, the things that I'll learn about myself and about life. You know, when you are responsible for passing that on.
Yeah,
you know?
I completely agree with you. I think it's an exciting thing for the future. It's like you always think, I could have a kid now. It's like I've got a few friends now who've had kids, and it's like how tired they are. I know. I mean, so my girlfriend, her sister, she's got 2 kids who are 4 and 2, 3 and 2, 3 and 1, and we looked after them for a day. It is knackering, like looking after 2 kids by yourself. Well, it's me and her, but for an entire day, it's like constantly just making sure they're not banging their heads and things like that. It's like hats off to anybody who's a parent who's at that stage, because it's just like mental. Like, and you don't think it's going to be that tiring, but it is. So that puts me off for now. And we can delay until we've done what we need to do with the company, or at least it's in a position where we can put more time towards kids, because I think that's important.
If you were to leave people with a question that they're asking themselves after this podcast today, what would it be?
It's a good question. I think if I was to relate it back to the insurance side of things, is, do you really know what would happen next? You know, do you really know what would happen if... Sorry, let me rephrase that. Do you really know what would happen if this happened? You know, if you died, if you became sick. And I think just have a really... think about it by yourself. You know, you don't need me here. Of course, look, always happy to help. I'm sure there are lots of advisors who are out there who are happy to help. But just write down, you know, what happens if I'm long-term sick? What happens if I'm unable to work? What happens if I'm passed away? What happens to my kids? What happens to my family? And just be prepared for it. You know, get that all sorted, and make sure that's done. In terms of motivational stuff, and I think, what happens if you don't do what you wanted to, or what you set out to do? What happens if you don't find your purpose? Because it's a big risk. You know, you've got to go out there. You've got to do what you want, and find out what you want. Because I think everybody's needs and everybody's wants are slightly different. You know, some people will just be completely happy existing as an employed person in an office all day, and I think hats off to them. Some people are completely happy in the jungle in Mexico, you know. But if you're at that point where you're questioning, am I happy? Figure out what you want and go get it.
I love that. That's brilliant, because it's one of the biggest inspirations for why I started this podcast, and why I called it what I did. David Goggins, you know, I don't know if you've read David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. Terrific book, really good. His life story. David Goggins. He's brilliant. I mean, you know, there's a right time for him. I said this. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, Living with a Navy SEAL. That was the...
Oh, right, yeah.
That's another one anyway, which is brilliant.
David Goggins is brilliant. Yeah. And his biggest fear in life is reaching the end of it. And God, he believes in God, or whatever happens at the end, saying to him, look what you could have done.
Yeah.
And you just couldn't face the tough conversation. You just couldn't face quitting the job, taking the risk, finding out, just doing it and just finding out. Because in reality, we think that doing something risky could wreck our lives. But in the long run, It benefits our lives. Like even a negative situation inspires positive change. Like we think that making a risk in starting a business, if we lose all the money in that, that could wreck our life. But in truth, we learn something so valuable in that failure that it is a positive thing.
Yeah.
We won't do it again.
Yeah.
And it gives a bit of novelty to life. It's a bit of zest, a bit of something fun. And again, I know you like Jordan Peterson, but he speaks about this thing, the yin and yang symbol is super symbolic of peace, purely because it's the balance between order and chaos.
Yeah.
You need 1 foot in order and 1 foot in chaos. You can't live a completely chaotic life, but you can't live a life in complete order.
Yeah.
You need
everybody has a slightly different balance than it is as well, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. You need a balance of the both, and that's how you explore. And he applies this to children, I think, when they've got in the back of the mind that like the parents are just over there on the park bench just chatting away. They're there in case they need them, but they've got this whole playground to go and explore and jump over these obstacles, and they could get hurt or whatever. They've got the element of order and they've got the element of chaos.
Yeah.
And that's where kids truly learn and grow. And it's not just kids, it's adults.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
To close up the podcast, we, believe it or not, we've done about 1 hour and 10 minutes.
Brilliant.
It might not feel like...
That was quick.
Yeah. I'd like to give you the best opportunity to promote yourself and what you're doing. And, you know, if anyone's listening to this today and has actually really started to think about, you know, maybe I should go and think about these things and, you know.
Yeah. I mean, look, so my company's called Check Financial. So yeah, very new company. I'm very passionate about insurance. It's my life, which is very sad. But I think the biggest thing for me is reviewing your situation. You know, if you've got insurance, you don't know if you've got insurance, maybe you've never even thought about it, have a call. It doesn't need to necessarily be with me. I'm not the only person who's good at what we do. There are others. I'd love for you to come to me. But I think the main thing is have a review with an expert who knows what they're doing and can make sure that you've got the right things in place. Because if it goes wrong, it's too late. You cannot go back. You cannot go and set up an insurance once you've already died or once you've already become sick. It's impossible. You have to do it before. And even if it's just a review, you don't need to do anything. It's just making sure you're aware of it, which I think is important. So yeah.
Brilliant. Ollie, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Appreciate it. Cheers.